Hey, this is Sam Black, and today I wanted to try doing something a little unusual. I just finished a Commander Cube draft with some friends tonight, and we were playing in paper. And so I took some pictures of some of my picks in the draft and some of the game states in the table. I kind of wanted to use it to try to give people some idea of how Commander Cube plays, because it's a very unusual format. So to start with, this was my first pick, first pack. Um, this is drafted with 20 card packs, and you take 2 cards per pick. So out of this pack, um, the 2 cards that I took are the 2 in the front, Ulamog the Infinite Gyre and Elixir of Immortality. Um, I value being able to loot my deck very highly. This is a 60-card deck format, but the games are very long and interactive, and running out of cards can be a very real concern. And especially, there are cards in this pack like Wheel of Fortune and Cavalier of Thorns that can make players go through their library pretty quickly. And while this cube does have a lot of cards to let you make sure that you don't run out, cards like Witness the Future, which is also in this pack, there aren't very many options to do that outside of blue and green, just in Magic. Elixir of Immortality and Ulamog are 2 of the best available colorless cards, so that you can have the power to do that in any deck. Now, theoretically, either Elixir of Immortality or Ulamog is sufficient to make sure that you don't deck yourself. But there are a lot of exile effects and cards you can get Gontied, and you can't necessarily count on one card to make sure that you won't get decked. And also, it's pack one, pick one. If I take 2 colorless cards, I stay very flexible. I can try to figure out maybe what other people are doing, or maybe get past some kind of card that gives me direction, and not, have some card pulling in one direction or another when I'm making those decisions in the future. And it could be totally reasonable to take either Elixir or Ulamog, and then also maybe like Worn Power Stone, maybe something that I could draft around, like Thassa Deep Dwelling. But I like just taking 2 colorless cards, taking 2 cards that let me just, be pretty sure that I don't have to worry about decking myself. I can plan to play long interactive games. I can have a lot of card draw. I can have some things that, mill me. I can play, sweepers and stuff, and, not necessarily worry about how I'm going to end the game quickly. So that's what I took. I think a lot of options would be reasonable. Second pack. Here, again, I get to take 2 cards. Jan Jansen, I think, is one of the strongest commanders in this cube. I think Mardu is very good. I've mentioned before that I think that red and black are better at having like proactive finishers, and I like white's not tempo negative. Like, I like white's card advantage, that you don't have to like dedicate a whole turn to like playing a card draw spell. You just kind of incidentally get it with stuff like Sanctuary Warden. And Eerie Interlude is another, like, it can kind of function as a card draw spell, but it can also dodge sweepers. White has a lot of ways to dodge sweepers, which is another, like, pretty strong thing to do in this format, where, a big thing that happens is people build up, there's some kind of sweeper, people have to rebuild, but if you can not be affected by a sweeper, then you're really far ahead. And Jan is a 3-mana commander. Cheap commanders are good. That's as cheap as you can get while being 3 colors. 3 colors, of course, gives you more options than 2. Has haste, gives you an immediate benefit when you cast it. in the form of, tangible increased number of permanents. And then, making 2 treasures can give you a really large mana advantage. Honestly, I think that there's a decent chance that I'll cut Jan from the cube at some point, because I think it's like a cut ahead of the other Mardu commanders, such that I feel like I end up looking for it or clearly wanting to play it as my commander anytime I'm Mardu. And I would prefer to have, a balanced range of different commanders that are good in different decks or do different things. I think Jan might just be a little bit stronger than the other options there. So anyway, I took Jan here, and then I think a lot of the other cards are reasonable. I took the Mightstone and Weakstone. It's, a reasonable artifact to sacrifice with Jan. Not a great one because, the tapping for 2 mana is pretty good, but Jan wants me to put a lot of artifacts in my deck, and so the Mightstone and Weakstone can be a removal spell or card draw spell that helps cast those artifacts that are in my deck. There are cards like Goblin Welder or something that would play really well with Mightstone and Weakstone, being able to, have it come back into play to trigger multiple times. Again, I think it would have been reasonable to take something like Sanctuary Warden, Yosai, Anaria Shepherd, maybe even Basilisk Collar or Coffin Queen, Blood Crypt. It's very... I think my goal in this cube is to have a narrow power band, so you could kind of take whatever. I also think it would be totally reasonable to take Alchemist's Vial, just to have, a nice 2 mana artifact that's not going to set you back on cards, so that when you play Jan, you have something that you're ready to sacrifice immediately to start getting value. I do really prioritize having a lot of cards like Alchemist's Vial in my deck if I'm playing Jan. I kind of thought I could table Alchemist's Vial. That didn't end up happening. So anyway, I took Jan and the Mightstone and Weakstone here. Third pick, here I took Nihil Spellbomb and Plaza of Heroes. Nihil Spellbomb is pretty similar to Alchemist's Vial in that it's an early artifact that I can play that I can sacrifice to Jan, and if I'm not sacrificing it on turn 3, then I can draw a card while doing it by spending a black, and then also being able to exile graveyards is very powerful, so if I don't need to sacrifice it to get Jan going, it's good to draw late to just wipe someone's graveyard at very little cost to me, prevent some kind of, deck looping or living death type situation or whatever. There are plenty of ways to take advantage of cards in the graveyard. So I took that and Plaza of Heroes. I think good fixing for 3 colors is very important when you have a cheap 3-color commander, because you're going to want all 3 of your colors as soon as possible. And so I'm going to prioritize non-basic lands a lot more highly when I have a 3-color, 3-mana commander than I would with like a 6-mana commander, where I might be able to, lean toward 2 colors, splash the 3rd, and maybe like get the 3rd color off of like a Coalition Relic type fixing, like some kind of 3-mana tap for any color fixer. But when I want to actually cast my commander on 3, Plaza of Heroes makes it a lot easier to do that. And then also, of course, Plaza of Heroes becomes good fixing for all of my other spells whenever Jan's in play, which should happen pretty often because, I'm prioritizing casting early. So I think there are, of course, again, lots of other strong options like Parallax Wave, but I took Nihil Spellbomb and Plaza of Heroes here. So I'm not trying to walk through every pick in the draft, just kind of showing some of my early considerations and how my deck started out. So skipping ahead to pack 2, first, the pack that I opened, pack 2, you can see the pack here. I took Ashnod's Altar and Liliana Dreadhorde General. Both of these cards are very good with Jan, who can give me a bunch of 1/1 constructs that I can, sacrifice to Ashnod's Altar to get a bunch of mana, draw cards whenever they die, like when I sacrifice them to Jan. With Liliana, I can also get Liliana into play early thanks to Jan giving me treasures. Any 2-mana artifact into Jan, I can just cast Liliana on turn 4 if I have another land. I can sack the artifact to make 2 constructs when I play Jan on 3, and then on turn 4 I can sacrifice one of the constructs to make 2 treasures, sack those 2 treasures, and tap my lands to cast Liliana. Turn 4 Liliana, of course, can be pretty strong. Yeah, I took those. I think, Lelia is really good. Gonti, Helm of the Host. I could have taken Gonti and Helm of the Host. I could take like Jocklehops to try to pair with, if I find like Cosmic Intervention or Teferi's Response or something. Again, as always, a bunch of possible directions. I took those 2. And this was a 4-person draft, so I'm getting a quarter of these cards. So I did end up with a lot of these other cards in my pool. And so then this is the deck that I built. This is more non-basic lands than I usually have. For those who aren't familiar with the rules here, that command tower at the top of the pile of non-basic lands, that is not a card that I drafted. Everyone gets to add 1 command tower to their deck after the draft. But I took a bunch of other non-basic lands, as I mentioned, to be able to cast Jan reliably, and also I do have double-colored cards in all 3 of my colors. So this deck is relatively creature light compared to where I usually am in this format, but Jan means that I can, I always have a 3-mana creature to cast, and Jan's construct making means that I'm better at going wide than it looks like. So I have cards like Soul Warden and Auriok Champion and Archangel of Thune that want you to have more creatures, and Tokashi is welcome, but Jan makes all those cards work. I thought that the Tokashi is welcome Jan interaction in particular was really cool. I can cast a creature on my turn to trigger Tokashi is welcome. Not that I have very many different ones to cast that trigger it, admittedly, but then also whenever I activate Jan sacrificing a non-creature artifact and it makes 2 constructs, that triggers Tokashi is welcome. I can also trigger Tokashi is welcome with Mimic Vat. I can trigger it, I have a variety of non-creature ways to trigger it. Liliana and such. Braids is another card that's really, really good with Jan. It's really easy for me to have, my deck is based on sacrifice, like planning to sacrifice artifacts. Not everyone's going to have artifacts to sacrifice. So it's pretty easy to, get into a spot where you're drawing 2 or 3 cards when you have every turn when you have Braids in play. And then as far as this deck's game plan, I have, I know it's a little bit hard to see some of these cards. They're, kind of blurry and small, and it's just the name on the top of the picture. But I have Cosmic Intervention, which is 4-mana instant. Whenever a card goes to my graveyard this turn, return it to exile it instead and return it to play at the end of the turn. So I have Cosmic Intervention, which I can combine with Cataclysm or Jocklehops to kill most cards that I don't have and not the cards that I do have. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to set up. And I can use Jan to stockpile treasures so that I can have a bunch of mana to do that, or just to cast Cataclysm or Jocklehops with a bunch of floating mana to make some big play afterward. And then I have, just kind of some generic sweepers and value cards. Reign of Riches is really, really good with Jan. That's a 5-mana enchantment that makes 2 treasures when it enters the battlefield. And then whenever you spend mana from a treasure to cast a spell, that spell gains Cascade. So since Jan's making treasures, it's very easy for Reign of Riches both to ramp me and to make all of my cards have Cascade. Divine Visitation means that anytime I activate Jan, instead of making whatever it would make, I make 2 4/4 Vigilant Angels. I also have other ways to trigger that, Goldvein Pick and various other things that make tokens in my deck. Liliana. Zot's Will. Zot's Will plus Divine Visitation makes a very large number of angels. Zot's Will exiles each other player sacrifices the creature. If you have your commander, both other players sacrifice the creature they control with the most power, and then exile their graveyards. And then you look at every creature exiled, and you make 0/1 thrall tokens equal to the highest power, I believe, among creatures that were exiled. So if you have Divine Visitation, then you're making angels instead. Divine Visitation, it's tricky in this cube that's relatively low on dedicated synergies to have a deck that's really, really reliably able to take advantage of it. But of course, commanders that make tokens like Jan make that change that dynamic a lot. So anyway, that's my deck. Mid-range Mardu with some kind of like end the game combo plans, in addition to just resets or whatever. And of course, looping my deck with Elixir and or Ulamog. So getting into the game. All right, so I have what I have for pictures. I was just using my phone, and the lighting's not really like set up optimally here. There's some glare, some blurriness, but trying to kind of craft a narrative about what happened in this game. So this is not the early game was an early game. I missed a land drop at some point, but just for one turn, and then once I hit my land, I was able to play some things that cantripped and not miss more lands. I was the starting player. I didn't end up falling too far behind. We played a bunch of stuff, and then this is the game after the first reset. So you can see pictured here. You likely can't see it unless you're very familiar with card art. In small blurry detail, so I just cast Cataclysm in this game. So I had a lot of lands and treasure tokens, and other people had a lot of stuff going on, and this Cataclysm, I think, left all of us with some pretty good things going on. I'm not far ahead here, but I felt like the board was getting kind of out of hand. I needed to answer other people's stuff, and so what I was able to do was Cataclysm, floating mana while I had no creatures in play, to kill a bunch of other creatures and enchantments and lands and stuff. And then after the Cataclysm, play an Emeria Shepherd, then play Isolated Chapel to return Soul Warden to my hand, then play the Soul Warden. So I have Mimic Vat with a Patron of the Arts imprinted, Emeria Shepherd, Soul Warden, and 2 lands. The Animar player has Animar with a bunch of counters, an Ornithopter of Paradise, and a Forest. The Ornithopter of Paradise, or the Animar rather, means that he can cast reasonably expensive creatures, so very much still in the game. The Tago and I can't remember the name of the blue-white partner player has Gilded Lotus and Boros Garrison with Flame Shadow Conjuring and Thought Monitor. So again, 5 mana there after the Cataclysm, very able to continue playing the game. And then the Yawgmoth player has only 1 swamp, but also Yawgmoth and Karn. So everyone's still very much in the game, but this dealt with a lot of problems that had been building up. So the game goes for a long time from here. This is kind of the first reset though. And so from here, what ends up happening is Animar and the Thought Monitor kill Karn before the Yawgmoth player's turn. And the game goes on from there. And we reach this point. So here, a bunch of stuff has happened. the Togo player ended up casting Warp World, while I had the Togo player had somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 permanents with the Warp World. I had 6. Another player had the Anwar player had 8. The Yawgmoth player had 4. My 6 permanents hit only 4 permanents. 2 lands, Sanctuary Warden, Divine Visitation. Sanctuary Warden and Divine Visitation are pretty cool to hit, though, since the Sanctuary Warden immediately removed a counter to make an Angel and draw a card. So I had a 5/5 and a 4/4 and a Divine Visitation and a couple of lands. The Togo player ended up hitting an Inferno Titan that was able to take the other counter off of the Sanctuary Warden. The other players, also ended up with a few things in play. The Togo player had the most mana still by a lot, but again, it was a dramatic impact that favored the person who cast it, but very much didn't end the game. We played on from there in a, kind of evenish situation, and eventually we got to here. I have Divine Visitation with Jan. So, I'm going to be able to activate Jan to sack my Golden Egg to make 2 more Angels. I have Goldvein Pick on an Angel. That was a card that was in my hand when the Warp World was cast. Goldvein Pick, when it makes a treasure, of course, that treasure is an Angel. So I'm making a lot of Angels here. And so the Yawgmoth player had a Nautilid ship that had taken the full graveyard of the Animar player. And the Nautilid ship had attacked and connected and then put Body Double into play as an Inferno Titan to kill some things. And so on my turn, to deal with that Inferno Titan and the threat of the Nautilid ship that had a bunch of other things under it, I used my Angels to kill the Animar player. So this is a picture of the game at the first player death. This is, post Cataclysm and Warp World. Boards changed a lot. A lot of things have happened here. And the first player is removed just really because I needed to deal with permanents that player didn't even control, but that I could answer by killing that player. So here, the Gonti player played a Puppeteer Click that did some pretty strong things, and then I don't remember the details, unfortunately. The Togo player was able to play they had the Aboleth spawn, which copies ETB abilities. And so Puppeteer Click was in play. And then they Transmogrifying Wanded the Puppeteer Click to kill it so that it would come back and on the Togo player's turn. So the Puppeteer Click persisted, which triggered the Aboleth spawn to also return a creature from the graveyard. And that let the Aboleth spawn return Gonti. The Gonti targeted me and took my Ulamog. And then one of the creatures ended up tapping to throw a rock at the persisted Puppeteer Click to deal with the Puppeteer Click before the Puppeteer Click could be equipped. Could equip Helm of the Host to start clicking things every turn. My Ulamog, taken by Gonti, killed my Divine Visitation to stop my Angel Factory. So this is after that turn. The Ulamog killed my Divine Visitation, the Puppeteer click's gone, and now there's an Ulamog in play. And so shown in this picture, the Gonti player has Massacre Girl in hand. Massacre Girl can kill the citizen, but there's nothing in play that the Massacre Girl kills after that. The next smallest creature is the Aboleth spawn, which won't die from the citizen dying. However, there's a Gauntlet of Power in play, so the Yawgmoth player has a lot of mana. So what the Yawgmoth player can do is play Massacre Girl, kill the citizen, and equip Helm of the Host to the Massacre Girl to make another Massacre Girl at the beginning of combat. That one coming into play will kill the Aboleth spawn, which will trigger both Massacre Girls, which will lead to killing everything else, including the Ulamog and each other. So the Gonti player uses Massacre, does that, killing all the creatures, and shuffling my entire graveyard back into my deck because Ulamog dies. So I end up with a 50-card deck with just those lands and the Gold Vein pick and play. There is a Transmogrifying Wand that's like out of counters and some rocks, and then a Helm of the Host and a Gauntlet of Power in play. So not a whole lot going on after that resolves. The game goes on for a little bit longer. I have very little going on at that point. I'd kind of run out of stuff, and the Helm of the Host kind of took over. The Yawgmoth player played Phyrexian Reclamation to be able to get back Vindictive Lich, and then made more Vindictive Liches. Earlier in the game, well, whatever. There's some Vindictive Liches, which are a serious problem for the Toggo player, who's now at 3 life, with something like 3 cards in library. The Toggo player doesn't have a way to loop her deck, but does have Blue Sun Zenith, which of course can prevent you from decking because it'll keep shuffling itself in. But unless you can deck your opponents with it, you don't get to draw new cards when you get to that spot. So the Toggo player was in a tough spot here with very, very little life, very few cards. And the Yawgmoth player was way ahead. So I needed the Blue Sun Zenith to help me to try to get back in it. So I was like, well, you're at 3 life. You need some way to stay alive here. There's a Congregate in my deck. I don't know where. If you Blue Sun Zenith me, I'll draw cards face up. And if I draw Congregate, I'll cast it targeting you. Not great, but also the best you can do in that spot. So that happened, but she only had enough mana when I made that deal to Blue Sun Zenith me for 3. I didn't find the Congregate, and it didn't really give me a lot to work with. And so we were both still pretty far behind against the Yawgmoth player. The following turn, the Yawgmoth player attacks to kill the Toggo player, who has redrawn Blue Sun Zenith from the 3-ish card library, and Blue Sun Zenith cast Blue Sun Zenith targeting me for 14 on the way out. So that's those 14 cards in the bottom left there. Those are the cards that I'm drawing from Blue Sun Zenith while the Toggo player is dying. So this is kind of the end game here. It's one-on-one. The Yawgmoth player is very far ahead, except that I've just drawn 14 cards. So then the question is, are these 14 cards good enough to turn the game around? And the answer was yes. So I make a whole bunch of mana. I play Inspiring Statuary and cast some other things. Soul Warden, Spirited Companion, to set up as planned, Cosmic Intervention and Cataclysm. So I kill all but a few of the Yawgmoth players' cards and all but a few of my cards, but all of my cards come back. I get to reuse all of my ETB abilities. I have a bunch of lands, a bunch of creatures to my opponent's 1 land and 1 creature. I gain a bunch of life from my Soul Warden. My opponent's at 12, and I win very easily from there. It takes like a turn. And that was the game. So I don't know how, obviously a lot of things happened that I didn't cover, but hopefully that gave you some kind of sense for what these games look like. It's tough with a format that I can't play online, but I want to tell people about. So just kind of exploring different ways to get more information out about this format, and this is my first attempt. So let me know what you thought, and thanks for watching.